Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming for our first ever Ask 5 Live. I appreciate you all being here. My name is Monica Molinaro. I'm the host of the Ask 5 podcast, and today we're going to have an episode of Ask 5 right in front of all of you. So the way that Ask 5 normally works is I typically am the host. I am joined by a graduate student co-host who will introduce himself in just a moment, and from there we ask the same question to 5 individuals who offer their insights based on their careers and the experience that they've had in the research world. So we're going to start this off by me introducing my co-host. We're going to introduce our 5, and then we're going to dig right into the very first question. So, Khoa, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you, Monica. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khoa. I'm a physician from Vietnam and a PhD student at the Institute. Honored to be here. Excited.
Thanks, Khoa. So, our 5, I'd like you all to introduce yourselves, I should say, to our audience. Dick, do you want to go first?
Yes, I'm Dick Cruess, and I'm a recovering orthopedic surgeon.
Meta?
I'm Meta Coleman. I'm an associate member of IHSE, and I teach anatomy at the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology, where I'm an assistant professor.
And I'm Don Boudreau, and I'm a retired clinician, a physician.
Norma Ponzoni, I'm a nurse, and I'm an associate professor at the Ingram School of Nursing.
Peter Nugas, I'm associate professor and co-associate director of graduate programs here in the IHSE.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to get started with our first question. Very, very scary. The first question that I'm going to ask everyone today. What do you think has been the secret sauce of your success? So who wants to answer that first?
I can try.
Yeah.
Secret sauce. I think this may sound a bit odd, but I think it's rarely saying no to any invitation. If I think back of about 35 years ago, as a junior member of the faculty, I was asked to participate in some faculty development workshops. It opened many unexpected opportunities. So that's about 35 years ago. 30 days ago, I was asked to review a paper, and that opened up possibilities as well, because the author said, oh, perhaps we should write this together. So never saying no, or rarely saying no, opens up opportunities.
Dick, I notice you leaning forward. Do you have something to say about that?
Well, I was just going to say that Don once said no to me. So, long time ago.
I said
So
rarely.
I think I've learned a lot since I joined the Institute. Jeff Wiseman and Salim Razak taught me about Frere in Belgium. And I'm a living example of oppressive pedagogy. And my secret sauce derives from that. I'm a white Anglo-Saxon member of the Christian tribe who grew up in an affluent, educated family. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I won all the lotteries. We never went to public schools. We were educated in the private sector, never had jobs to contribute. And that sort of created who I am. But as also, I think I've said several times, I also just was extraordinarily lucky. Joanne Miller was the budget officer when I was dean, and several times a year she would state unequivocally that I had a horseshoe up my ass. And that horseshoe has kicked in first meeting my wife in medical school, but at several times during my career, things that I had nothing to do with established me as a successful dean and frankly, put me with the Institute. That's my story.
That's lovely, and it sounds like it was a very lucky horseshoe. It sounds like it hurt if it was kicking you that many times.
No, totally painless, totally painless.
Oh, okay, perfect.
It's a rubber horseshoe.
It was a rubber horseshoe, that's what it was. Norma, did you want to follow up?
Sure. So the IHSE is 50 this year, and so am I. And I think that forces a certain amount of reflection on your life. So I think my special sauce is twofold. One is working, so staying curious, right? So looking, reading widely, looking for opportunities to learn, being curious about other people's work. And my second is to find like-minded colleagues. Sometimes mentors are hard to come by, and so finding like-minded colleagues to tackle the hard things with, like, writing the grants or publishing papers. Sometimes it's easier when you're two, and so I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Peter, you were nodding along.
Yeah. Norma's always full of wisdom, and she might be the baby on the panel, or one of the babies. So, yeah. I think my background in sociology is relatively unique, and it's enabled me to see connections across different topics and different settings. It's helped me to be able to put on the conceptual hat. As a qualitative researcher, from a sociological perspective, I've always valued the importance of theory underpinning research. From a sociological perspective, I think that it's enabled me to take and to make different and exciting opportunities for research across different settings, from emergency department coordination to interprofessional collaboration, to healthcare management in resource-constrained settings, but more importantly, to draw connections to broader themes like work-based learning, professionalization, and organizational culture.
Thank you. Meta, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, mine is not that specific, but I would say flexibility. I think rigidity can leave you hurt and broken, and I think there is a great value in knowing how to be flexible and kind. That doesn't mean that you have to be pushed over, or that you have to necessarily give up on your values or your boundaries, but I think having some inherent flexibility in your system, whether you're in the clinical setting, because I spent almost over 20 years in the clinical setting as a physical therapist, so that taught me great flexibility, which I think has been a great asset in academia. So I think staying with flexibility and kindness is a good sauce. Yeah.
Khoa, I saw you nodding along as Meta was answering her question.
Yeah, the task to synthesize on the secret sauce is so difficult. It's so diverse. But for me, when I'm listening, I feel like a sense of gratitude and appreciation. Appreciate for what make you here at the moment, your upbringing, but also to appreciate your own talent, your own point of view, and then to be open to welcome all the ideas and collaborate with others. And I feel like, even though you didn't tell, but I feel a sense of caring and commitment to missions, like teaching and serving and healing. You didn't say it, but I can feel it. Thank you.
That's great. So speaking of gratitude, I think we can be grateful for everything that has been great in our trajectories as researchers, and grateful for things that aren't as great, which is what transitions into my next question. So, what is the worst piece of advice you've received about research, and why was it the worst piece of advice? Who wants to go first for this one? Norma.
Sure. I think the worst piece of advice I've ever received is to stick to one area of research. And I think that is good advice for some people, maybe for career researchers that really want to drill down and really build an area of expertise. But I think for people that are more clinicians, that they should follow their curiosity and not limit themselves to one particular area, participating in research sometimes across the board, following trends or following your own interest.
I'd like to add to that along the similar thought. I don't think it was bad advice, but maybe a misconception to stay in my lane. I'm not sure that's always a good idea.
I also heard a groan within the room when you said that.
So for many years I did stay in my lane, and I think since I got out of my lane, I have first of all increased my flexibility, but also was able to learn a lot more, and I think that intersection is kind of a good seed for innovation and not silos. So actually crossing over intentionally in other lanes can be very, very helpful. So I don't think it was meant as bad as an advice necessarily, but I took it as advice at the time, and I think that as I get older and have more experience in academia, staying in my lane is not always helpful.
Dick, I noticed you grabbed your microphone.
Yeah, that's a complicated question, and it sort of depends on the outcome. When I finished my clinical training, I spent a year in the Department of Biochemistry at Columbia, and the advice of my mentor was to study the lipids of bone matrix. As a result of that, I became the world's leading expert on the lipids of bone matrix, for the simple reason that nobody else was interested in it, and it's of no significance. And that sort of could have done me in, but when I was studying to be an amateur biochemist, the bone and cartilage were relatively simple. There were only a few chemical components, and they were easy to measure. So my mentor, who had given me the advice to measure lipids, I also had to measure the other components of bone and cartilage. And by the way, I never became a great scientist, but I was always a decent opportunist. And having mastered some techniques in cell biology and how to measure that, I spent the rest of my life and was funded for 28 years by the Medical Research Council using the techniques that I had acquired in carrying out my bad advice. So a little bit depends on what you do with it. And again, by the way, that horseshoe was working pretty hard because it was dumb luck.
Don?
I'm going to be fairly concrete in answering that one, but a preamble first. Since we have probably people from other countries listening on this conversation, so I have to give it a little preamble. So in Canada, there are 3 big external funding agencies, one for clinical research, one for natural sciences and engineering, another one for the humanities and the social sciences. I was persuaded, or I was advised, and helped to apply at one point for one of these grants provided by the Canadian Institute of Clinical Health Research, or CIHR. That was a bad mistake. I didn't have the background, I didn't have the pedigree. Of course, I was with a team, and it was a great team, but really the team didn't have the right pedigree, I don't think, to apply for this kind of research. And it's interesting because the 3 funding agencies have a different philosophical approach. The one for the natural sciences has a success rate of around 50%, 40-50%. The humanities and social sciences, I believe, is up to around 65%. So their approach is like, let's fund as many people, let's have a wide bandwidth, a wide pipeline, and people will be perhaps successful. In the clinical health, the CIHR, it's quite different. They want to fund the people who are really top-notch. So I wasn't top-notch, so I think it was a bad mistake. And I applied, I think, 3 or 4 times, and of course failed because the success rate is so low, and it was a mismatch. But of course, it was a learning experience, but I think that was probably not the best advice for me. And I think the message there is that one should look very, very carefully at the funding agencies as to what their philosophy is.
Thank you. So Peter, as Don was speaking, I see you slowly leaning over in your seat. So did you have something to comment?
Yeah, well, for me, one of the worst pieces of advice that come to mind is actually to form a lot of networks. And, that fulfills kind of the well-intentioned impetus for good teamwork and collaboration makes for better science. But early on, I spent probably more time than was valuable meeting a lot of people and, you know, forming a lot of networks. And, you know, I think networks are obviously important, but it took me a while to kind of realize that what was more important, you know, for focus was, you know, to try and identify exactly what it is that would be my unique contribution, and then kind of work out who I was going to collaborate with and why in relation to that contribution.
Khoa?
Wow, I kind of like want to give up on synthesizing on the advices because they're so diverse, and I feel like when we listen into advices, even when the advices are with good attention, we need to think carefully, think it through. Does it apply to my principles and my situations? And then to take it carefully, because like, I used to have an advice from that like, I should learn to say no. But then like now, this is a secret source of Norma. So we have to apply carefully to our situation, where we are at that moment. So, but I think like, they're all great advices in certain way, but can be very bad advices in other places. Thanks.
Okay, so before I move on to the next question, I'm just going to do a temperature check of the room. How are we all doing? I think that was a little disappointing, personally. Can we do that? How are we all feeling? Much better, thank you so much. So, next question. There's a lot of junior researchers in the room right now. And so this question really relates to them and where they're at their stage in research. What is something you wished your younger self would have known about research and scholarship? Don, do you want to go first?
Sure. Probably to make this, I wish I had understood, and I still don't understand it to today, but the better inkling about the distinction between methodology and method. Because when I was young, you know, sort of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I thought all I had to do is identify a problem, come up with a question, and then find the right tools to answer the question. I think it's actually more than that. I think one has to sort of like situate themselves, identify the worldview that they have to try to answer that question. I'm going to try to come up with a metaphor. Metaphors always limp, right? So there's not going to be a good metaphor. But it relates to something personal because I recently bought a house. So it's an old house, 104 years old. And there's some moisture in the basement, right? So I have to try to decide, like, what's the cause of this moisture in the basement? It could be the foundation, but it could also be the roof. It could be the gutters. It could be the neighbors who built the house and changed the incline towards my house. The point being that the tools that I have to try to solve that depends on what happened in the past and what my perspective is. Am I a roofer? Am I an expert of foundations? How do I look at the world? How do I sort of try to answer those kinds of questions? As opposed to just the tools. Because a plumber can have the same tools as an electrician, but they have a different perspective on things. So methodology versus method. That's something I wish I had understood, because I think it's very valuable. So I'm not sure if that's clear, and my metaphor probably limps very badly, but.
Does his metaphor limp very badly?
No. It's very
Thank you
clear.
so much. Who wants to answer next? Dick.
I wish I had known early, certainly before I got to be dean, that in the world of research, you do what you're trained to do. You know, in clinical medicine, if you look at the history of research, early on, it was practitioners in Journal of the American Medical Association practicing and writing up. They weren't trained to do research. That doesn't exist anymore. And those of you who are young, decide what you want to do and then get trained to do it. I sort of had to learn the hard way, but it's absolutely real. We keep on giving people positions for which they do not have the training or expertise to carry out. That's actually a fairly profound statement, by the way.
I didn't hear very many oohs and ahs, so if you want to do it now, thank you so much. Who wants to go next? Norma, go ahead.
I think advice to my younger self that imposter syndrome is a thing, right? I think it took me a full 10 years to feel comfortable in my role. And that's a long time to feel uncertain. Our morning speaker talked about uncertainty and embracing it, and that's kind of a hard thing. So don't give up. I'm glad I stuck with it, and I think that's the advice I would give people. It could last longer than you think it might.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think if I had to give my younger self some advice, it would be that you do not have to be an expert to contribute. I wish I would have contributed sooner and have less fear about it. I came into academia kind of late in life, really from a clinical experience and moving from clinic to classroom. And I wish I would have started earlier. And I would have had less, I don't know if I would call it imposter, but less preconceived notions of what my contributions could be. And now that I'm on the other end of teaching, I see how much my students contribute. And I think that you can contribute at any level in your career and in your journey as a learner. But I also think that a thing like mentoring is really important as you progress through your career. I think there's a lot of sort of idea that a mentor is something, mentoring is a need you have when you're new at something, or when you're learning a new skill, or you don't know yet how to navigate an environment. But I actually found, at least as a clinician, that mentoring was really important the more experience I had. And I think that mentoring should be lifelong, both receiving and giving. And so I continue to find mentors in different walks of my life. And so I would not encourage anyone to think that that's an early stage, whether it's educational scholarship or academia or clinical practice. I think mentoring is lifelong.
Yeah, I wish I had appreciated more the importance of clarifying expectations with colleagues, even about relatively small things. I tended to feel that if I was getting on well with the people, that everything was going to run smoothly, and kind of overlooking the fact that people have different expectations. Like, for example, a much more senior sociological colleague took 18 months to come and actually saw me in a completely different building with shared colleagues, and looked like he was ready to punch my lights out, as we say in Australia. I don't know if you say that here, but and wanting to know why I put him as last author, and I'm kind of going, hey, you're the king, not realising that in healthcare and in clinical sciences and sometimes more natural sciences, last author is pole position. So, and sometimes it's much simpler. Like it could be just a team member wants to, thinks that we should meet weekly, and you think it's okay to meet monthly. So that's a lesson.
Yeah, I like to think myself as a young person, a young researcher. And when I listened, I read somewhere that one of the most critical part of the productivity of a researcher would be the early career, when it's shaped by a mentorship and environment that nurture them. So I really feel the sharing by Dr. Dick Cruess. And I really think about the mentorship as a bidirectional relationship. It's just not from the mentor, but it's also by giving back to the community, to the relationship, that we feel satisfaction, we feel we're contributing. And I think that would be the most beautiful thing to have in an academic world, where we have somebody who nurtures, who guides us, and it's a trusted relationship for a long time.
That was lovely, and I'm going to ruin it with my next question. So we're talking about this nurturing of relationships. We're talking about this growing throughout your academic career. And something that happens throughout your academic career, not just in your early career, is the phenomena of rejection. So just a quick show of hands in this room, how many people have experienced rejection in their academic career at some point or another? Perfect. Okay, so the question that I'm going to ask our five, how do you handle academic rejection? My answer is not well. Peter.
I mean,
You've been
you know,
rejected
it's
the most often, so-
what's that? Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'll come crying to Don's office, you know, upstairs there, on the way to the third floor. Yes, lots of tissues. You know, thank you, Don. You know, I wish I'd known earlier on too that rejection's part of the academic game, and also I wish I'd known that, or I wish I'd been told that there's a loose or imperfect relationship between hard work, skill, and success, when it comes to paper submission and grant applications, for example. And it's a cliche, of course, but, you can't take it personally. Like, we don't, there are a lot of variables, that are at play, and we never really know, why we get rejected. So another thing I think is important is to keep occupied. If you keep occupied and you've got as many projects as you can handle, then it tends to take the emotion out, as well as being stimulating, of course, but takes the emotion out of publication or grant application decisions. Like you're busy working away, ping, the email comes in, and oh, I got that grant, fantastic, or you got rejected. Like, what was that? Oh, I did that. Damn, it was. I thought that was a really strong project, but oh well, I'll try again.
I think I seem like to be agreeing with everyone who's speaking, but I think to normalize it rather than to personalize it. I can speak as a physical therapist. I've done many treatments that didn't work, and then you try something else. I think it's part of growing, part of learning is to have a little bit of rejection. I also think it's important to share it and talk about it and not keep it quiet. And that's perhaps a way to normalize it and to be really open about it. It's okay to not feel good about it, but to really move on and to have, keep busy and find other ways to give. There are many ways, not one way.
It depends on the context and the form of the rejection. I'm coping now with a paper that academic medicine turned down. If I don't get it in, it doesn't really matter. I think it's an important paper. My ego's mixed up in it, and I'm kind of pissed off, but I'll get over it. I had a paper submitted to the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery when I was on the editorial board, the British journal. It was a paper studying disuse osteoporosis, and we had mounted some rats with casts, and we mounted them so that they were not able to move, and they had feed and water available. And the editor of the journal rejected my paper, but he rejected it with an absolutely devastating comment that I had violated all of the rules and regulations of animal welfare in the United Kingdom. And I was devastated. And my coping with that was much, much more difficult than with this paper with academic medicine, because it really went to who I am. And by the way, I was wrong. We shouldn't have done that experiment in that way. So you've got to be a little nuanced in how you talk about how you handle rejection, because there's some rejections that are real and that hurt. Academic medicine doesn't hurt. Sorry, Kevin, you don't hurt either. Kevin.
Don, go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to follow up something that Dr. Cruess said. I think that the format or the way, the tone of the rejection is critically important. I remember when I was young, I applied to an undergraduate liberal arts college and applied for a scholarship. I don't remember what kind of scholarship, but it was restricted to people of a certain faith, I think Methodists, and I was Catholic, and I was rejected on that basis. But the letter of rejection was so wonderful. It was like just so, I said to myself, I want to go to that college. I mean, if they can reject in such a nice way, it's the place to go to. So it was a fantastic rejection. On the other hand, I've had a paper rejected by a journal, and it was very destructive. It was really unnecessary, and sort of like how we should give feedback, right? There's different ways of doing it. There's functional ways and dysfunctional ways and destructive ways. So that's very important. But there's something else, and again relates to something Dr. Cruess said earlier. I think we have to understand that there is some luck involved in all of this, particularly in the academic world. I could be wrong with my story, but I think there was once an editor of The Lancet who, I think she was having a particularly bad month, and she said, look, I could just take all these submissions, I could throw down my stairs at home, and whichever ones reach the bottom, the first 3 reach the bottom, those are the ones I'm going to accept. I think she was not in a good mood that day, or that week. But I think she was saying that there is a certain amount of luck involved, so I think it's something else that we should remember. And some of us have horseshoes in a very sensitive place, and some of us don't.
Not all of us can handle the horseshoes.
Not all of us can handle horseshoes. Yeah.
No. Norma, go ahead.
Yeah, rejection's hard, right? But I think it's about taking the emotion out of it. So I give myself 48 hours to be upset, and then I try to see it as an opportunity for honest and valuable feedback and a direction to move towards in the future. So I think if you can reframe it that way, it's not as hard. And it is hard for people to be honest in their feedback that they give, so you need to be appreciative of that.
So I got a lot of rejection in recent years. So this is very personal. And I feel like, thank you for your honest sharing. Like, it humanizes us back, like as researcher, like we're all human, and rejection hurts. And I also like how we think about it. It's not an individual problem, but it's something we can communicate and celebrate, but also like go together and handle the rejection together. And don't make it a secret, don't make it something to be said alone. So I think the community will really shine here to celebrate and to on your hard work, and also to help you cope with the rejection. And I want to highlight that, like Monica, she's got an ingenious invention that's called rejection punch card. So you can set it up your goal for yourself when you get 10 rejection. So for myself, I will get to go to the cinema all by myself and eat an ice cream. So I'm getting there. I got 8 already. Thank you, Monica.
You're so welcome. I'm so glad that it could help. But yes, I think there's ways of making rejection fun. So in my case, yes, it was making punch cards to keep a tally of how many times I've been rejected. And once you get your 10th rejection, just like you would at a coffee shop, you get a free coffee, you get a treat because you deserve it from being rejected so many times. So you might as well make it fun while you can, right? So let's once again do a really quick temperature check of the room. How are we doing? Yes. Thank you so much. We have one more question for our 5th question of the day. What was an opportunity that you had that was an unexpected catalyst for your career? Norma.
Okay. I was working on a unit as a nurse, and I ran into a clinical instructor, a previous teacher of mine, and we started to chat. And she said to me, "You know, there's an opportunity to teach that came up that I know about, and I think you'd be really good in that role." And I said, "Really, me? I don't know about that." But it's really kind of embracing sometimes what other people see in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself. So I'm really happy that I took her advice.
Meta, I'm going to pick on you next.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think one was an invitation to teach also. I was invited to the anatomy lab at a university that was in the United States that was starting a doctoral physical therapy program, and they said, we don't have enough people in the anatomy lab, can you please come? And at the time I had just closed my private practice, and I was working full-time in a hospital, both outpatient and inpatient, and I was like, I don't really know where this is going to fit in, but I guess I had a good stomach feeling about it, so I went, and I completely fell in love with being in the anatomy lab again, which I had done sort of throughout my career intentionally. And then COVID happened, and I was sent home, and I was able to finish some academic writing, and lo and behold, we ended up moving to Canada. My husband teaches for McGill too, and coming here, couldn't use my physical therapy license right away. So I was invited to teach anatomy at McGill, and so many things sort of were, I could say, like precursors, but I'm extremely grateful, and I find that it's so rewarding to be around students and to be able to sort of marry clinical experience with academia at this point in my life. I'm 56. So I just find it I think catalysts can come at any time in your career. And so I think that's why I said staying flexible is sauce when you have to pivot quickly for various reasons. So yeah, I would say being invited to teach was a great gift, which I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
Dick, I saw you smiling while Meta was answering.
When Sylvia and I retired from our administrative jobs at age 65, I had negotiated a third term as dean and asked for a guarantee of a sabbatic year at the end. And we had pre-arranged to go to the Institute for Advanced Study in Oxford. And I wished to study the relationship of academic freedom and the responsibility to society that medical schools have. And because in my time as dean, I had lost a lot of the autonomy that had traditionally existed. And I really thought that we should study that. Sylvia, of course, was a hospital employee, so she didn't have an official sabbatic, but obviously we were going together. So she said, "What should I do?" And I said, "I don't know." So she said, "I'm going to study professionalism." Well, I started studying the link between academic freedom and medicine, and I got about 1,000 articles on tenure in medical schools, and very little on the abstract idea of academic freedom. Sylvia did a literature search and got about 10,000 articles, mostly written by guys like Nugas in the social sciences, that was just so rich. And lo and behold, the rest is history. I never wrote by the way, I've still got a stack of reprints on academic freedom, but professionalism got to take over our lives, and it just was, again, horseshoe and wonderful.
Nugas, do you have a response?
Always. So Yeah, I've been fortunate to have, been able to move to a few different international settings, and I found that's been very enriching. It's kind of, a contrast in terms of how you see yourself, identity-wise, and your perspective on your own work, and the area that you see yourself in and want to contribute to. One that I'm particularly grateful for. I was fortunate to get a Fulbright postdoc scholarship to UCLA, and I had a couple of very, very good mentors, and not only did some really big lights get turned on, in terms of analysis, and the link to theory and the quality of empirical claims that we make, but I think that it was good mentoring, and the ability to be in a different environment. I think that was really, really helpful and enriching, and to be able to immerse myself. So that was something was really helpful for me.
So I can follow up on Peter's comment about the Fulbright scholarship. I was fortunate as well at one point to receive a scholarship which allowed me to take time off clinical work. And a lot of time, a couple of days a week for a year, a couple of years. That protected time was absolutely spectacularly important and useful. Because as a clinician, very often we have many balls in the air. We're doing clinical care, administrative work, teaching, trying to do some research. But to have protected time to read, to look at it very deeply was very, very important. That's one thing. But I'd also like to say one more thing, and I'm repeating myself, because I've mentioned it earlier, but that is to respond positively to invitations. I think to me that's been very, very helpful. So an invitation doesn't come with a flashing neon sign that says, this is an opportunity. It doesn't come packaged that way. So very often an invitation to do work can seem like an imposition. Oh my gosh, I have to do that. I have so many things to do. But as much as possible to try to sort of be positive and accept invitations, because there may be a wonderful opportunity hidden there. So that's another, I guess it goes around to another secret sauce ingredient, right? But I'm repeating myself, sorry.
Oh, it's so tempting. I want to think about any catalyst in my life. And I think about I was also a Fulbright scholarship awardee. So I was studying at Boston University at that time, and I applied to McGill University PhD program. And I think it's against the advice of my mentor to apply to Harvard. And then I got into this program, and I think the catalyst was that I have a sense of community. Everybody here to listen to my opinion, my contribution, and then they give back generously. So that's really the catalyst for myself, and I would love that in the future, when I had an Ask5 in future versions, I would like to say that was my catalyst at that time. Yeah, to find a sense of community.
When we come back to season 25 of Ask5, we'll have you on and have a conversation about that then. But with that, first off, to the audience, I want to thank you all. We're coming to the end of our recording of Ask5. So thank you, everyone in the audience, for listening today. You did amazing. Thank you so much. Please help me in thanking our panel of 5 today. Dick Cruess, Matt Coleman, Don Boudreau, Norma Ponzoni, and Peter Nugas. From there, if you could please help me in thanking Khoa Duong today for being my graduate student co-host.
Thank you, Monica.
And thank you all once again for taking part. I'm going to close us off now. My name is Monica Molinaro. I was your host of today's live episode, and I thank you so much for joining us to Ask5. Ask5 was created by Meredith Young, Monica Molinaro, and Tamara Carver. Hosted by Monica Molinaro. Produced by the Office of EdTech, and financially supported by the Institute of Health Sciences Education and Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at McGill University. Thanks for listening.